Welcome all hunters, anglers, trappers, and shooters to the only fish and wildlife conservation podcast that goes behind the scenes of the business of conservation, the Connecting with Conservation podcast. Our podcast is hosted by John Gassett from the Wildlife Management Institute and Jim Curcuruto of the Outdoor Stewards of Conservation Foundation. John and Jim will talk with experts from all sectors of the conservation arena about their passion for conserving the great outdoors. So please welcome our hosts of the Connecting with Conservation podcast, John and Jim.
Welcome to Connecting with Conservation, the only podcast that gets into the business of how fish and wildlife actually works. I'm John Gassett, your host with Connecting with Conservation. I'm also with Wildlife Management Institute, and I'm here with my co-host, Jim Curcuruto from Outdoor Stewards of Conservation. How you doing this morning, Jim?
Doing good. I tell you what, right before we hit the record button, we're talking a little bit about the importance of communicating the messages that Connecting with Conservation does, the podcast, because, new research came out not too long ago about the cultural acceptance of gun ownership, hunting, fishing, trapping, and target shooting. And it really, it's a shocker how much, that the general population doesn't know about gun ownership and hunting and all the positive contributions that the industry makes, the state agencies make, the end users make. So it really is important to talk about those type of things. And today we've got, the industry talking about how they support conservation and through, the production and all that sort of stuff. So before I ruin it too much, we'll introduce our guest, Dustin Wallace from Faxon Firearms. So Dustin, welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your personal background before we get into the business side?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Dustin Wallace. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing for Faxon Firearms. I'm coming up on my 6th year with the company. And I originally started here really just in content marketing, just kind of started in marketing and then eventually took over marketing proper and then direct to consumer sales and customer service. And then in 2023, so summer of 23, we merged the departments and sales and marketing, customer service is all one unit. And I took over as director at that time. So it's been fun, to kind of come up during this time because, when I was hired, it was the fall of 2019. So it was wild, to be in for just actually, it was November of 2019. So I was going to my first SHOT Show with the company within 2 months, and then everything happened with COVID and the business really started to move directions. And obviously the industry was in just the crazy spikes. And at that time we were moving facilities as well. So we were getting ready to, for those who aren't familiar, with Faxon, the Faxon family has owned and operated multiple businesses in the greater Cincinnati area since the 1970s. And it started with Faxon Machining, which was founded in 78. And we were kind of birthed out of Faxon Machining in 2012. And so when I first started, we were all in the same building. And Faxon Machining predominantly does defense work. So they make ordnance for the Air Force and various other supports of the warfighter. And so we are, we were in kind of like one little corner of the Faxon Machining building. And then mid 2020, we moved into our current facility. So we're just about 5 minutes up the road from the Faxon Machining plant. But you get to see a lot of different things, and it's been pretty incredible to go from that first SHOT Show and kind of being in appendage, in a factory floor to in our own space and kind of doing our own thing. We do get to work with Faxon Machining here and there, which is a lot of fun. But our whole point is being able to take those years of engineering and manufacturing excellence and quality and apply it to the firearms space.
Gotcha. Very cool. Yeah. And you got a broad mix of products. I was looking at your website and, from completed handguns, long guns to a lot of parts, barrels and the like there. So, I guess what's what's keeping you busy in production right now?
Yeah, for sure. We are a truly omni-channel brand. We do direct-to-consumer sales all the way down to wholesale distribution and work with some international exporters as well. But being a manufacturer first, we do quite a bit of OEM as well. So there's going to be things that we do or have the capability of doing that you wouldn't necessarily see on our website or in our catalog. But a lot of people know us for barrel manufacturing. So we're one of a handful of companies here in the States that actually make barrels from bar stock. So, we start with raw bars of steel, normally 416R stainless and 4150 CMV. And we do all the drilling, reaming, rifling, profiling, stress relieving, drill and pin ops, honing and lapping when needed, all of it in-house. The only thing we send out for is heat treat and coatings. And a lot of that comes from years of just expertise in deep hole drilling. When the Faxons were doing automotive and oil and gas and aerospace work and even into the Department of Defense work. And so we were able to take some of that capability along with us. But a lot of people would know us for the barrels. And so that's where we move a lot of units. But what started the barrels was the original product that our founder, Bob Faxon, came up with to start this brand. And that's our patented ARAC 21, which is a ARAK hybrid, long stroke gas piston system, complete upper, that also we sell as a rifle and a pistol, but it's a upper receiver that drops on any mil spec lower. And because it is, a hybridized kind of design, it was a proprietary barrel. And so they needed to learn how to make the barrels, to be able to continue the development of the ARAC. And from there, as you guys probably know, the AR barrel market is very wide, very vast. There is some commoditizing of it, as we've seen in the last few years. It's more people are learning to do it, especially the drilling side, which was normally and has been kind of our I wouldn't say niche, but it was part of what made us unique, because there's a lot of companies that they buy blanks and they may do the finishing, they may do the turning operations, they may pin an extension on there, but up until the last few years, not everybody did their own drilling. But we still do all that in-house, and that's what a lot of people know us for. And because of how we do things like stress relieving and how we handle the material and how we do the rifling process, we're able to make very lightweight barrels as well. And so a lot of people will know us for like our pencil profiles and our gunner profiles. Like we were in the What Would Stoner Do rifle a few years ago. So some of the lightweight things, started to become a bit of a niche as well, because of how we were able to, make these barrels, still make them safe and accurate, but extremely lightweight. It's become synonymous so much that sometimes, like if you just like Google us or plug it into ChatGPT, it'll start saying that some of our products that aren't even lightweight are lightweight. So it's become synonymous there. But over time, and actually right when I was getting onboarded, we were actually starting to launch like the complete firearms lineup. So having, a complete line of AR-15s, and then a couple years later we added the AR-10s, complete upper receiver groups or full firearms. And that was really just kind of putting all those pieces together. And the same thing was true for the pistol barrels. We do the pistol barrels in-house as well. So we do a lot of aftermarket Glock, SIG, and M&P barrels, and we've done several others on the OEM side. And about 2 years ago, we started dipping into bolt action. We started with barrels first. It's generally how we go in this company because barrels are, our core competency is we'll start with the barrels. We were on the 8.6 blackout project with Q, and it needed a 1 in 3 twist button rifled barrel, and we were the first people that were able to do it. And that is a phenomenal cartridge to shoot in a bolt action as well as an AR-10. And so we kind of did a little co-branding and things and kind of tested the market in bolt action. Then we started to make our own, in-house as well. So those are kind of the things that kind of bring us up to now. And then this year at SHOT, we announced our suppressors, which start shipping this year. So we have a few different lines of suppressors that we're working on. But yeah, you're right. The catalog is pretty wide. It's pretty vast. But the industry post pandemic is one that is very wide. During the pandemic, you were able to run 5 or 6 different parts and, make your numbers, because everybody just wanted, 16-inch 5.56 barrels and 9 mil. And that was about it. Now, we're seeing like all the ARC cartridges. We work with Hornady on their ARC cartridges. We just launched 338 ARC this year. And with that, every single time a new one comes out, the others get more attention as well. So 22 ARC was last year, but it saw an uptick because of 338 ARC, and 6 ARC came out, right before the pandemic, and we saw an uptick over the last 2-3 years, with interest in that cartridge as well. So, that's one thing that I think is unique right now and is really going to be a test on the industry and manufacturers like us is, how do you keep up when it's not so much about how deep your shelves are, but how wide they are, for whatever offering. And stuff comes in and out of vogue, and you never know if a Wildcat's really going to take off or whatever it may be. So having that agility to be able to keep up with the changing tides, because like you said, you've all done research, you do, worked with the NSSF and all that. And you've seen the scope reports. How that works. And, these numbers are staggering, the drop-offs that we've seen and the changes that we've seen. And so, how agile a manufacturer like us is able to be, will really, basically predicate our success.
So Dustin, just as a follow-up to that, and full disclosure, I am a customer, as I've mentioned.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
And what got me to Faxon was I do build ARs recreationally. I enjoy building them. And, you're the place where I know I can go find the parts I need. You've got them in stock. I get them within a couple of days, and they're high quality and they're affordable. So, you check all the boxes for me, but I was one of those customers that I don't know if I bought the first one, but I do some urban wildlife management, and historically I've done that with 300 blackout until I heard about the 8.6. Started trying to figure out where can I get one of these, and literally y'all were the first. I think you were the first manufacturer to make one available publicly. So I snagged one and working on that build currently still, but it's a work in progress. But I'm just really impressed with the fact that there are lots of manufacturers out there, lots of places where you can go and see the parts you need, but in many cases they're sold out. They don't have them. They're behind on production or whatever. And y'all seem to manage that fairly well. You keep up with production and hey, you put products in the hands of the people who need them when they want them, and that's at a reasonable price.
We try to, the first thing I'll say is I'm glad you noticed that what we call the price value equation. We're definitely not, or the way I put it, like when I go to buy group shows and I'm meeting with new dealers and whatnot, is I say listen, we're not bargain basement, but we don't make you refinance your house to buy our stuff. And the way that we do it is every single customer that buys one of our products should feel like they got more than they paid for. So, we're not out here slinging $30 barrels, but you're going to have, a nice American-made, lifetime warranted, product that comes from our floor. So I'm glad you see that. That's something we strive for, is having a high price, value equation in there, making sure that people do feel like they got a deal, they got more than they bargained for. But there's, with the way we do quality and how we do production, they won't be the cheapest. We've never wanted to just be the cheapest. That could be an easy thing to do. It's a big race to the bottom sometimes in the commodity end of the business. And then, as far as like inventory and things go, we've taken a stand that we generally, we fill dealers before we fill our own website, right? So, there are things listed, and I was telling Jim before the call, there are things listed that might say out of stock, but that's because they're just shipping to dealers first, and for whatever reason, this particular part took off, and the demand is high. One, for example, that we're trying to get our druthers up with is like 6.5 Grendel bolts and carriers, because of all the expansion in the ARC cartridge platforms. That's the bolt and carrier it takes, and so we saw this enormous spike. And so there's reaction time, to get those out and keep up with those trends. So stuff comes in and out every day. And whenever something's out of stock, we encourage, our direct to consumer customers to go visit their local shop or get online, see Midway, Optics Planet, Brownells, all those usual suspects that carry our product as well.
Yeah, and it's funny watching the way the industry sort of, I won't say expands and contracts, but product lines vary depending on a number of factors, politics being a big one. Pandemic was another. We didn't know what to anticipate there, but it turned out to be a boom for the firearms industry. But you're right, you saw the sort of that narrowing of focus. Everybody wanted the common calibers then, 5.56 and 9mm. When it broadens out, people are less stressed, for lack of a better term, then they start going to the more custom type calibers to experiment with. So just an interesting study to look at to see, customer buying preferences based on external influences, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's 100% true. And, a lot of people during that time were consolidating the cartridges that they wanted to keep on hand. So like even during that time, we have what's called the Bantam, and it's a set of 9mm PCCs, and they're Glock mag compatible, right? And so during the pandemic, that was like a big deal. And they're like, oh gosh, not only do I get to consolidate to this cartridge, but I could also consolidate the types of magazines I'm using and all that kind of stuff. And so, I mean, not everybody that was buying was doing it for those reasons, and we saw some other growth during that time regardless. But you're absolutely right to try to go deep as much as you could. I mean, I remember pretty vividly back before I took over sales and everything, like I had a little more time in my creative side, on the marketing end. And we used to do a weekly podcast as well. And now we can't really find the time to do it. But I remember we were getting ready to record an episode at the day the lockdown orders came in Ohio. And we had dealers calling just like, we'll take whatever you got and we'll take it all, and it was absolutely wild. And some of them, were hedging their bets, right? They didn't know when ABC company was going to deliver, so they were going to open the same POs with companies XYZ. And kind of whoever got it to them first was, who was going to get paid. So, so it was pretty crazy. And I honestly don't think that we really saw the end of it until about 2022. But, for the last 2 years, especially, it's been a whole new normal. And you're right. The outside influences, with politics and whatnot, a Republican president goes in office, you normally see a bit of a slump, but the industry itself feels more secure. You don't feel as much impending threat. Now, I'm sure people will hop in the comments and tell me how wrong I am about it. But as far as what the data would tell you, is that, generally speaking, it takes a Democratic president in office or incumbent, or the threat thereof or possibility thereof to really see those spikes.
But yeah, I tell you what, when you mentioned COVID was not only a boom for the industry, the gun manufacturers, the ammo manufacturers, but it was a boom for conservation, because the way conservation is funded, right? Manufacturers pay a portion of the proceeds of every first sale on their guns and ammo, and that goes directly to state wildlife agencies that will then use those funds to manage lands, build shooting ranges, improve habitats, all that sort of stuff for healthy wildlife populations. But one of the things with the AR platform that continues to support conservation is not only the first sale. Let's say it's a $1,500 firearm, about 10% of that, $150, going to go to those state agencies to do that conservation and range development and hunter safety. But the AR platform, right? You're going to burn a lot of ammo when you go to the range, right? You're not just, refilling a shooter, right? You've got your 30 round magazines lined up, and it doesn't take you long to go through a lot of ammunition. And every time you pull the trigger, it depends on what you're shooting, but that's 10 cents every time you pull the trigger that goes to conservation or whatever the case may be. Every time you go through a round of a magazine of shooting the AR. So, we got right into the business of it, Dustin, but are you enjoy getting out hunting and shooting yourself, or?
Yeah, it's really funny because the way I grew up, at least in my teenage years, it was a little more rural. And I always joke with the guys here that I was brought up just redneck shooting. It was not, we'll go to the range like with customers or whatever. And all these guys here, they're so much better than me at it. And, and they got their spotting scopes out and they're like, well, if I go this many clicks, and I was like, I used to just take a Ruger Red Label and just shoot at a garbage pile, like that's kind of how I came up with it. But yeah, absolutely. And obviously we get to do, some unique things, doing those range events, doing trainings with new customers, or just even being part of development. Taking things out for testing, is probably one of my favorite things now. Like, is it going to work? Is it not going to work? What changes do we need to make? When you're kind of dialing in, things like feed ramps or gas port sizes or whatever. And fortunately, I don't have to be the end all be all on that. I could just kind of be adjacent to the people who really know how to dial it in. So that's fun. But, really what led me to this was I believe in American manufacturing. I did not have true industry experience before coming into Faxon Firearms. But what I did have was an affinity for the American industrial base. My father was basically a sales rep in the industrial world, for 30 some years. And I remember even like getting my driver's license, and you have to get your temp hours. I would just drive him around to all of his accounts, so I'd be, all over, all over the state of Ohio and into West Virginia and Kentucky, just, paper mills and power plants and all this sort of stuff. And I was really drawn to, one, this being a family business, two, that you could point on a map and say, this is where my stuff came from, in greater Cincinnati. And two, just, being able to have that, that base and that, kind of it's kind of a throwback. Now we'll see what tariffs do to everybody. It may be very common in the next couple of years, but, to have, an American-made, family-owned manufacturing business, engineering business, solutions business, does not seem as common anymore. And so it's a fun thing to be a part of. I mean, it has its own unique challenges, like every business has, but it's something very unique. And I think that resounds with people, the people who are pretty loyal to our brand and continue to buy our products. They feel a connection, to the brand itself and what we stand for, and what we offer, to our community and to our employees, and just how we do business, because there's a lot of people making a lot of great products. There really are. The industry's full of great companies. And so, even like when we go and we train our reps, it's the same thing. It's like, hey, like they got to sell the brand first. You've got to have a connection to the brand. And I think there are very few brands as Americana, as ours. And I really, really take that to heart.
So Dustin, speaking of tariffs, our industry, when we talk about our industry collectively, it spans, broader than firearms and ammunition. It gets into fishing tackle and archery equipment and all that. Being that y'all are an American made company, do you see any potential impacts from tariffs on y'all in a negative light? In other words, like our angling tackle and archery to some degree, they're feeling the bite because they have a lot of products that are made overseas that are now subject to those tariffs coming in, and that's going to impact consumer spending. But you make all your stuff here.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, the one thing that I think we could see, and there was something actually, Robert, who sits behind me here in the office, was talking to me about it last week. But one thing that could be of note is that all the people who were getting like raw materials overseas, now have to flood into the domestic market to get their materials, and so we could probably see some inflation there. Now, granted, there are multiple different ways to buy your raw material. A lot of it is done kind of a year previous, where you kind of lock in, from a mill or a forge house or whatever. We're going to have, this much product, this many pounds of product we're going to commit to, and then they stagger those deliveries through a year or however long that takes. But yes, we've already started to see, people go, oh, geez, well, now there's all this new demand, right, from people kind of onshoring or reshoring their raw material buying. And so when that happens, it's just a typical supply and demand bell curve, so but we are fortunate that we do so much in-house. Now, granted, we don't do Swiss or small parts, like we don't do like springs or triggers or things of that variety. So I don't know, I mean, maybe we'll see some of that change. I'm not 100% confident how everybody else on those supplied parts are getting, their raw materials and so on. But as far as like the main parts of our business, getting extrusions and getting forgings and getting billet and getting, raw bar, I think just the reshoring and the new way or people coming back to the U.S. to get those materials could, cause some inflation that ultimately, we would have to figure out how we do that. We always want to make sure that our processes get better. And so that way we can make up the cost savings just in how we are processing parts on the floor. And that's something you're always looking to do to be more successful and be more profitable and also provide a better value to the customer. But who knows? I mean, I know some friends in the industry that, they get a lot of stuff overseas or they get stuff made overseas and yeah, I mean, massive price increases, like in such a weird time of the year too, to have to do those, the buy group shows are done and SHOT Show's done and all that sort of stuff. All your announcements have been made, your price lists are made, your catalogs are made, and it's like, 25% increase. Yeah. Those guys are certainly dealing with it more directly than we are currently.
Well, one of the things when you mentioned your, affinity for American manufacturing, I've been to half a dozen factory tours, whether it's ammo or firearms. Man, it just amazes me. You take a chunk of raw material and it comes out this beautiful, work of art, for a firearm enthusiast at the other end, and doesn't take too long to do. Very cool stuff. And I'm like you. I like the term redneck shooter. I'm not a technical guy. People talk to me about this. I pull the trigger and sometimes clean it, But you have, I think, on your website, like, a section there. Is it the Faxon Embassy where you can kind of have some ambassadors you can learn from and that type of stuff? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the embassy basically is a twofold piece. We started during the pandemic times, and basically it was a home for some of the, the influencer types and the trainers that are, that like to use our product or do reviews on our product. And so you have that kind of level of folks, but the embassy also encompasses our loyalty program. So, if you're, a brand ambassador or whatever, you basically come through and apply to us and, we give you a little link on the website and maybe give you some product to review and things of that variety. And then anybody who makes a purchase, on our on our website, could automatically sign up for that loyalty program. And it's all kind of housed under the brand of the Faxon Embassy. And with that, we do try to do pretty regular blog posting as well. So, like I mentioned, we used to do a weekly podcast, not so much anymore, as things have changed. But we still post to the blog, several times a month, and some of it might be just like press releases of what we're up to and what we're doing. But others are, how do I change a handguard? How do I install a gas block? How do I, XYZ? So we try to put that stuff out there as well. And then also, FAQs on our products specifically. So yeah, we try to stay up with that as much as we can. And then also, just going and visiting the customers and doing shows and, just kind of trying to be out there. And we've made, some really great brand connections. In the last year, we became the new supplier for M1 Garand barrels to the CMP. And they've been very open about, saying that it's us, and we've done a lot of cool marketing stuff together because they have an audience in the industry that we don't have, and we have an audience in the industry that they don't have. And there's obviously overlap, but that's been a lot of fun too. At SHOT Show this year, just like there's a bunch of guys that would never come by our booth, but they know, or they heard that we were starting to make these Garand barrels, and they wanted to come shake us down a little bit. And so that's been fun. And so yeah, we got to go out and like do the Premier Expo with them, and they do the national matches at Camp Perry, which is here in Ohio, so we're sponsoring that this year. Got to do the Bianchi Cup with them last year. So I think those partnerships and kind of getting out in front of people and is one of the best ways to do it, in my opinion, and finding those other brands and those other entities in the industry. Because at least as a consumer, I think people like to see when people are joining up with each other, and doing interesting things together. I think people appreciate the camaraderie, even outside of the competitiveness, of the industry proper.
Yeah, that's kind of connecting with conservation, right? John's a wildlife guy, I'm an industry guy, and we're like, we both talk to the same people. Let's try to figure this out. But talking about, getting more information, first of all, thanks for coming on and being able to talk a little bit about a market we don't talk about a lot, but it really does make sense that the ARs are a big funder of conservation, when you walk through it. But tell us a little bit more about your website and your social media tags and all that, where people can find more information on Faxon.
Yeah, absolutely. So the home for all of it is faxonfirearms.com, and you can find more information there and links to all of our various socials. We're at Faxon Firearms on most platforms. I think it's at Faxon_firearms on X. But besides that, find us. We're pretty much on any platform, including LinkedIn and like I mentioned, X. I think we even have a Pinterest. So you can find us pretty much wherever you like to consume media, Instagram as well. So yeah, follow us there. And then, when you visit the website, I'd encourage you to sign up for our mailing list. And we put a lot of stuff out there as far as like great deals and web exclusives, as well as like links to our blogs and press releases and other partnership things that we're doing.
Well, Dustin, thanks again. Thanks again for coming on. It's good to finally meet a neighbor. You're 45 minutes from me, and just never put two and two together. But great information, Jim. Always good to have you on board as well. To our listeners, remember that the manufacturing industry supports our outdoor recreation, provides $1 billion a year in funding for conservation. So support these folks. Faxon Firearms makes great products, good prices, and they got them in stock. So go to their website, check them out, and see if you can find what you need. And hope you'll download this podcast and some others. Subscribe if you would. That'll get you reminders of when the next ones drop. And other than that, we'll see you in the woods or on the water.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Connecting with Conservation podcast. Please do us a favor and tell your buddies, friends, family, and others about what you've learned here today. If you like what you heard, come on back anytime and listen to another episode of the Connecting with Conservation podcast.